program is called Mastery in Living, though we'll put a little qualification around that, huh, Neale? And maybe Neale, my partner, can come in here and share a little bit as we're getting started as well.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everyone understands that I don't think that I'm a master in this game called living, but I do think that we have an opportunity to move on our way to undertake that path with more tools at our disposal and more opportunities than we've probably ever had before, thanks to the wonderful messages in the Conversations with God dialogue. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the commitment that you've demonstrated in moving your own life to the next level by your very presence here. Nice to have you with us.
We're going to talk about, our agenda is to talk about mastery and living, and there are 5 specific things that Neale's going to get to here in just a moment. Let me read what those things are. The first is to briefly discuss how we access the divine presence who is speaking to us always and in all ways. The second is to live in the knowledge that you are one of God's offspring, and there's nothing you are required to do to get better or to be seen as perfect and beautiful in the eyes of God. 3, to activate and tap into the full power of God that you and all of us are created to contain. And 4, to turn your feelings of anger, fear, doubt, and pain into love. And then finally, 5, to consciously choose how you desire to experience your life. So those are the things that we're going to get to, and Neale is going to talk about those here in just a moment. Now, on the Conversations with God books, again, many people share that these beliefs about God and about life began to shift in a significant way in the 1990s and these last 2 decades, where we went from a common understanding that God was up in the clouds somewhere exclusively, and that you and others are over there, and that there's some hell down there beneath the earth or somewhere, to this new understanding that there's actually only one presence, that we're actually all emanations of that one presence that we call the divine, and that's true for you and me, for all of us, and also for all of life, for the earth and all of life. So we've come a long ways. That's not a common understanding across the whole planet, but more and more people are coming to that awareness. And this is why, and Neale, let me just turn this thing over to you here to speak about this for a moment, but you had your own way of expressing this when you were interviewed on TV, and when you're still interviewed on TV and radio and so on, where you talk about these old beliefs about God and about life versus the beliefs about God and about life that have come through in Conversations with God.
Well, yes, I remember the time when I was asked a question in a critical way, critical in terms of who was hearing my answer. I was on the Today Show with Matt Lauer a number of years ago, and the Today Show has millions of viewers, not just in this country, but not just in the United States, I should say, but all over the world, really. So here I am, and I'm doing this interview with Matt. It's a very short interview. They don't give people more than about 15 or 20 minutes at the most, often 7 or 8 minutes to do an interview. And I was in the middle of the interview, and then toward the end of the interview, he had about a minute and a half left. Matt Lauer said, "Well, Neale, you claim to have talked directly to God. You claim that God has spoken directly to you. He talks to everyone, according to you. But what is if it's true that God speaks to everyone and spoke to you, what is God's message to the world?" And then he said, we have only about 30 seconds. If you could bring it down to one paragraph, it'd be great. We've got 30 seconds. And I love those national interviewers because they always wait until you have about 30 seconds before they ask you the most important question of the entire interview. So I thought very quickly, what is God's message to the world in 30 seconds? And suddenly it came to me. And so I just blurted it out without really thinking past the end of what I was receiving. I said, "Matt, I can give it to you in less than a paragraph. I can give it to you in 5 words." So Matt Lauer said, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, God's message to the world in 5 words. You've got me all wrong." And Matt's eyebrows went way up. Whoa. I said, ladies and gentlemen, if that message has no validity, then there's nothing further to discuss. If it has even a little validity, we begin to then ask, then if we have it all wrong, what would correct be? What would it be to be accurate about what God is and what God is doing and why we're all here and all the rest? So God's message to the world became very important. You've got me all wrong. And that later became the basis of a book that I wrote called God's Message to the World. So that's what I shared with the world. And I think what we have to understand is that we have really, as Steve was talking about, before about 20 or 25 years ago, people were thinking of God just in the terms that Steve was outlining. He's up there, we're down here, and never the twain shall meet except on Judgment Day and all the rest. All those stories about reward and punishment and the whole idea, and none of that, in my understanding, has any validity. So it's time for us now, I think, as a species, to move to the next level, in not only just in our awareness about God and who and what God is, and who and what we are, not just to move to the next level of awareness, but to the next level of demonstration, to begin living into what we now understand to be true about the divine.
Yes, and boy, we're going to talk about that at some length. In fact, there's so much to cover in so little time. So we're just going to push on here. But one of the things that we're going to do in the context of the 5 things that we're talking about tonight, but also in the context of a new program that we're announcing this evening, Neale and Humanities team, is to talk about it in the context of the all 10 Conversations with God books, where we went through the books to identify the 24 most important treasure that was scattered across the books, which is to say, in God's messages to the world, the 24 things that were most powerful, most important, most essential to living the kind of empowered life that we want to live individually, and essential to creating the collective life that we want for the planet. That's one of the dimensions to this program. These 5 of the 24. Another dimension of the program is that as we talked this out, Neale and Humanities team, was to talk about this in the context of how Neale personally embodied these messages to go from the person that he was a couple decades ago to the person that he is today. Neale, I could say more about that, but this is your personal story. Maybe you could come in here and just.
Well, I'd like to say that it's not so much the person I am today as it is the person I'm attempting to be today. I will acknowledge that I've started off on the path. At least now I know where I'm going. I've picked up many tools along the way. I don't want to represent myself as a paragon of virtue or someone who's really arrived at the place that we all want to go to, but I will notice that I'm now on the path, and firmly on the path, because of the tools that I've been given in Conversations with God. So yeah, we can talk about that. And I think what is the first item of these 5 we want to talk about today?
The first item here is accessing the divine presence, who is speaking to you always and in all ways.
I think that there are, for me, a couple of steps that work for me. I'm not going to call it a process, but I'm going to just the way that I attempt to access the divine presence. First of all, step number 1 is I have to acknowledge that it actually exists, that there is a God, and we're all past that, I'm sure, or you wouldn't be on this program. But secondly, not only that there is a God, but that God actually talks to us. That is, that God communicates to human beings directly. Then step 3 for me is to acknowledge that not only does God talk to human beings directly, but that I am worthy of receiving such information, such communications, excuse me, directly from the divine. But once I get past those steps and declare, by the way, this is not a small thing. A lot of people do not feel that they are worthy to be spoken to by God. So this is not a small step to take. But once we acknowledge our own worthiness, then it becomes a process of how do I get to that place, the source where God's voice can be heard by me. Let's be clear about something very quickly here. God is not some source, as Steve said a minute ago, outside of us. So what we're really talking about is, how do I access that place within me where God resides? And I call that place the soul. It's been my understanding from the Conversations with God material that the soul is the living presence of the divine within us. That the soul is the repository as well of all wisdom, eternal wisdom. Whereas the mind is the repository of knowledge, all the knowledge that is picked up from the day that we were born and even before our birth in utero. So the mind contains a wealth of knowledge, but the soul contains an internality, an eternality of eternal wisdom. And the difference between wisdom and knowledge is immense. So the trick is to get from the mind to the soul, if I could put it that way, to find a bridge between the mind and the soul in order that we can hear clearly the words and messages of the soul, or if you please, have a conversation with God. And what I do, the process that I use, is to adopt a state of being. States of being are how I access the soul from the mind. That is, when I embrace a state of being, a particular state of being intentionally, please excuse me, when I embrace a state of being intentionally, I bridge the gap and I allow myself, even I actually use the mind as a tool with which to get to the soul. I instruct my mind, the part of me that exists outside of my mind. You ever talk to yourself? That's the part I'm talking about. The part of us that can actually talk to ourselves. I say to myself, okay, mind, I want you to adopt a state of being that will allow you now to access the soul. And the mind will then set aside my story, my history, all of the data that it's holding about, what I need to do to survive and all the rest, all the worries that I presently have, all the concerns. It just sets those aside temporarily. And because the mind will obey you if you are instructed specifically. The mind says, okay, what state of being would you like me to embrace and to adopt and to express? And I say, clarity. Clarity, wisdom, and holiness. I dare to say this to my mind. I want to be clear, wise, and if I could put it this way, holy, in the sense that I am recognizing the sacredness of my being. And the mind says, fine. And it moves into that state of being. I can actually feel it coming over me, actually. And as those states of being come over me, I then find myself accessing far more easily the wisdom of the soul and actually hearing, if I could put it this way, the voice of God. Now, I usually do this either before I'm going to give a lecture or before I'm going to make a presentation, before I'm doing a workshop, and certainly before I do any writing. I access that deliberately and on command. But you don't have to be making a presentation, giving a lecture, or writing a book. You can do it at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday just because you want to. So that's the process that I use. I hope it's valuable to you. Just decide, what state of being would I feel myself in if I was opening to a conversation with God? And then choose that, instruct your mind to place you there, and watch what happens.
Okay, Neale, the second one here is live in the knowledge that you are one of God's offspring, and there's nothing you are required to do to get better or to be seen as perfect and beautiful to God.
What I use in order to allow myself to experience that knowledge is I have a visual image that I use, actually. I imagine a time when I held a baby in my arms. It's happened to me. I've been blessed to have a baby in my arms many times in my life. I've got 9 children of my own, and now I have 7 grandchildren. So I've had babies all around me a lot of the time in my life. And the process that I use is I hold that baby in my arms in my imagination, but I allow myself to feel into that. And I feel into the feeling itself of what I feel in my heart, how my heart opens. All of us have had that feeling. When you hold a tiny infant, 2 weeks old or 2 months old or 2 hours old in your arms, and your heart opens up and you realize that you're holding utter perfection. in your arms. And then I realized that this is how God feels about us. This is how God feels about me, that I am utterly perfect, utterly without fault, utterly and totally and completely lovable in the eyes of God. And, you know, and then I think of the wonderful statement from Conversations with God, where she said to me directly, if you saw you as I see you, you would smile a lot. So I always say to people when I'm doing workshops and retreats, if you saw you the way God sees you, you would smile a lot. And that's how I get in touch with that place of knowing that I and all of us are perfect and wonderful in this moment right now, just as we are.
Okay, Neale, and this third item, activate and tap into the full power of God that you and all of us are created to contain.
I activate and tap into that in my own life, if you're asking about my experience. But by the way, my answers are only mine. They may or may not work for you. But how that works for me is when I forget myself, when I get myself totally out of the picture. I ask God, what does it take to make life work? And God said to me, all you have to understand is that your life is not about you. It's about everyone else whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. So how I activate the power of divinity that flows through every living sentient being in the universe is that I allow myself to notice that I'm doing it for and on behalf of another. So whether it's my beloved spouse, my children, people in my immediate family, those around me, my friends, my staff, my associates, or total strangers on the street, I find it very easy to tap into that power. And I do it with a simple sentence. You know, I do lots of coaching calls. I do lots of mentor calls. I do lots of work with individual people and with large groups as well. And I say this particular sentence. This is a key sentence that I use whenever I interact with another that calls forth and taps into the power of the divine. Here's the sentence that I use. How may I serve you? How may I serve you? And then I say something quite daring. I'm sharing this with, being very vulnerable to share this with you now. I know that to say this publicly could open me to criticism, but I'm going to do it because you're asking me to give you my own experience and the tools that I use. I say to myself, obviously not out loud, but I say to myself, whenever I go anywhere and walk into the world in any way, I say these words in my mind. I have come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. Words that were said by another person several thousand years ago. And I've taken that example and allowed myself to assume that I am capable of doing that. Even if I can't always be so good to myself, I know there's no limit to how good I can be for another. And finally, how I tap into God's power and make it usable in my life, I ask what I call the magic question. At every juncture in my life, I simply ask a direct question, whether I'm having a conversation with my beloved wife, whether I'm involved in a business deal, whether I'm ordering lunch at a restaurant, whatever the interaction is, I ask myself a simple question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? If I'm invited to read a book, somebody offers me a book to read. And what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? If I'm invited to a dinner party, and what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? By asking myself that magic question, I immediately put myself in touch with an answer that comes from a place beyond my regular mental process. And that's how I tap into the larger and most powerful aspect of divinity that flows through all of us all the time, by asking those kinds of questions of myself. Those are the three ways that I tap into and then use as a practical matter the wonderful, wonderful power of divinity that flows through all of us. Get myself out of the way. How may I serve you? The fourth question is how to turn your feelings from anger and fear into peace and love and joy. Okay, fair enough. I turn my feelings of anger and fear into peace, joy, and love by allowing myself to notice when those feelings of anger and fear arise within me, and by embracing them as being totally welcome, by noticing that those feelings are totally welcome and not feelings that I want to reject. See, what I was doing in the early part of my life was rejecting feelings of anger and fear because I thought it wasn't okay for me to have those feelings. It's totally natural and totally normal to have feelings of anger and fear. Just to use two examples. In fact, anger and fear are some of the natural emotions, the 5 natural emotions of human beings. So the first thing I do is I embrace the feeling of anger and fear. Then I transmute them into love by noticing that they actually are feelings of love. Let me share with you what I mean by that. What I'm trying to say to you is that anger and fear are demonstrations of love. If you love nothing, you'd be angry about nothing. If you loved fear, if you love nothing, you'd be afraid of nothing. You'd have no fear about anything. So fear is an expression of love. Anger is an expression of love. All we have to do is make sure that those expressions of love stay loving in the sense that we don't let those expressions hurt, damage, upset, or in any way negatively impact another. And that's fairly easy to do if we keep our wits about us and if we notice with clarity that those feelings are totally okay to have, and we remain in a place where we welcome them and simply say quietly to another, if another person's involved, we would say quietly to another, I'm so sorry to have to tell you that I'm feeling a bit angry about this right now, or I'm feeling fearful about this right now. I want to share with you a sentence that has been very powerful in my life. Speak your truth, but soothe your words with peace. May I repeat that? Speak your truth, but soothe your words with peace. And that's how I transmute the feelings of anger and fear and any other negative feeling into the feeling of peace and joy and love.
Number 5 is consciously choose how you desire to experience your life.
I consciously choose how I desire to experience my life by asking myself that magic question I told you about a minute ago. Maybe I preempted my own answer, but I'm going to repeat the question because that is how I contextualize. That is how I consciously choose how I want to experience myself. By asking myself a direct question. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? I'm doing that right now, by the way. In my mind, I'm doing it right now. As I'm being asked these questions, as I'm watching myself on the screen, as I've realized I'm talking to many, many people all over the world who are watching us from all across the planet. Part of me is asking myself, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And then I follow it by the other 3 questions that I have found very powerful in my life. Who am I? Where am I? And why am I where I am? These are very insightful, powerful questions that I ask myself. Who am I? An individuation of divinity. Where am I? On a worldwide telecast right now, sponsored by Humanity's Team. Why am I where I am? So that I might share what little I've come to understand, what I hope will serve other people in the format that we've created here. That's how I decide consciously how I want to demonstrate my sense of self and how I choose to recreate myself anew in every golden moment of now, in the next grandest version of the greatest vision ever I held about who I am. Finally, let me say this very quickly. I make sure that I'm very clear what that grand version of me is. At least once every 2 or 3 months, 3 or 4 times a year, I sit down with my notebook and I make sure that I've written out my latest version of myself. Who am I in the world? And how do I choose to be? When I come to clarity about that, then I can recreate myself in the next grandest version of that. Steve, those are the tools that I use. Thanks for asking the question.
Yeah, beautiful, Neale. Thank you. As you know, as I mentioned, as we were beginning this program, we were looking for a program that could create an arc across all of the Conversations with God books and bring in material for empowering our own lives and creating this so-called heaven on earth. And you wrote a little paragraph about this program that we might put together with Humanity's team. Would you like me to read that, and then maybe you could just talk a little bit about it?
Well, yes, I want to explain to people that, it takes much more than, the better part of an hour program to really get into what we're now having a chance to look at in depth. It's been the great desire of my life, honestly. I almost want to say the great mission of my life since my Conversations with God experience, to find a way to share my experience of this material in depth, to have the kind of conversations we're having right now, but over a long, extended period of time, many, 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 many hours. So I was invited by Humanity's team to create a program that would allow me to do that. And I decided to call the program Our Final Frontier, because it's about the last frontier, as I see it, for humanity, the last place we have to go before we merge humanity and divinity and become one, not just in word, not just in thought, but actually in our experience, in our expression. So yes, I did write a paragraph explaining why I called it Our Final Frontier. Steve, yeah, you're welcome to read that. I don't have it in front of me, but
Yeah.
you have it in front of you, so go ahead.
I've got it here, so I'll read it, and then we can talk about it, because this is, in this day and age of digital marketing and stuff, there's so many things that are kind of in a headline, and I know how you feel about this. I know how I feel about it. But let me first just read the paragraph. It says, again, this is Neale's paragraph. It says, I consider the messages in Conversations with God and the commitment necessary to apply them in our everyday lives to be our final frontier for humanity. Once we as a species can fully embrace the truth about God and about ourselves, we will have erased our final misunderstandings about life and about the divine, and will at last be able to embark on the journey to mastery and living, which is the awaiting and rightful inheritance of every sentient being.
That's exactly how I feel about it. And I think it's important for people to understand that this is, in fact, our inheritance. This is what is awaiting us when we choose to step into the embracing of it. So that's the big challenge for humanity. It is, in fact, our final frontier.
Yes, it is. And boy, there's so much I could say here too, but all of us, as we look at the media with the things, climate change and the environment, with the nationalist populist movement that's here in the United States and in many other countries around the world, isn't it true that that we are in our final frontier? I mean, aren't we all feeling into that in some way, and realizing that there is a way to really create this life for ourselves and our family and our community and the world that that truly is fulfilling, real health and well-being, and a really fulfilling life? Isn't there a way to do that? And we believe that there is, and so we embarked then on this journey with Neale to excavate, if you will, the 24 most important messages from the Conversations with God books, which that spans 10 books, that speak to how we can embody as the part of the divine that we are, to create this fulfilling lifestyle for ourselves and for our community and for the world. And of course, this what we're then going down into here is one of the truths in Conversations with God and elsewhere. I'm going to read something which we just surfaced in the last week from Wayne Dyer after he transitioned, but that speaks to this central truth in the Conversations with God books, that disunity does not exist. Disunity does not exist, and of course we can. It's easy to read into that intellectually and say, yes, disunity does not exist. But if disunity does not exist, then that means every one of you, every viewer here present, every person on the earth, the divine herself, all of the plant life and animal life on the planet, that there's actually no separation, which means then that we can feel into the divine, we can feel into each other, because there's no separation. So where we really embody that and live into that, which is part of what this program is about, it is an entirely different way to live our life on the planet. And I know this is a very conscious group that's here. So I think in some respects we're all doing this, but I'm also guessing that we can all push out further. We can go deeper, that we can live more as one in health and well-being and in a fulfilled state than we are today. Let me bring in, Neale, shall I bring in this thing that we surfaced from Wayne Dyer, from him in the afterlife, because it's kind of interesting here.
Yes, I think it's wonderful and fascinating as well that Wayne continues, God bless him, to educate us really and to inspire us and to inform us about some of the great truths of life and of the whole cosmology that we call life. So yes, what was brought through from Wayne?
So this is what was brought through from Wayne, and you all, if you want, go ahead and write down the name of this person, Karen Noe, spelled N-O-E. Karen Noe, N-O-E. She wrote a book called Your Life After Their Death. Your Life After Their Death. You can Google this if you want, and you can pick this up from Google. It's how we came across it. But after Wayne Dyer passed, and you remember that was, I think, in 2015, his family, of course, was very sad, very challenged, and they reached out to Karen, who's also an author with Hay House, where Wayne Dyer was also an author, and she worked with the family. But then let me just read what happened to Karen Noe as she was working with the family. I'm just going to read something to you which expresses this whole thing. Karen Noe always loved the work of Dr. Wayne Dyer, and after discovering he passed away, reached out to his daughter, Serena, who had been on her radio show the year before, to send her a copy of her book, Your Life After Their Death. And after a synchronistic encounter on the Hay House author bus at I Can Do It event in Orlando, Florida, she wound up doing a reading for many of Dr. Dyer's family members. But to her surprise, Dyer started coming through directly to her. Here are some of the things he, this is Wayne Dyer, told her from the afterlife. He started talking to me about we consciousness and the unity of everyone and everything, the compassion for all of life, and that what a person does for oneself or another affects the whole, she shares. The most important thing that he talked about is how we are all one. And we think, because you are there and I'm here, that we are different people. But we are not. We are all one, including God, the angels, the ascended masters, deceased loved ones, and nature. Although one of the teachings he shared before passing was about the importance of I am, when it comes to creation and understanding God is within all of us, but now he realized it's really we are, Noe says. He talked about how God is within each and every one of us, with no exceptions. And we have to realize divinity within all of us and the power that we have, because we have tremendous power, but we are unaware of it, she explains. God is only love and peace, and you must be love and peace to fully feel your connection with God. You can reinforce your connection to God with positive thoughts. So that's the end of that reading, and I'm bringing it in because it's absolutely what many of the important messages and conversations with God are about, and it's what this Our Final Frontier is about that Neale and I are going to share about it here in just a moment. But Neale, anything you want to share before I go on here?
No, I mean, actually not in this particular case, because it was just said so beautifully and so profoundly. And I guess I would share this much. What is exciting to me about hearing that and knowing that the source from which it came is that it confirms really everything, every single word in the Conversations with God dialogue that came through me. And it is an illustration that God is talking to all of us all the time, each in our own way, each in our own time, and each using the tools that have been made available to us. So I appreciate what Ms. Snow has done, bringing that information through. And I'm very, very thrilled and excited to notice that it confirms everything, word for word almost, that one would find in any of the Conversations with God books. We are all one. The holding of that idea, the implementing of that thought as part of our daily life is what would change the world virtually overnight.
Yes, it can and will, and it is. You know, and of course I know that's why we're all here. We believe that it is right now. This shift, this awakening has already begun. So as we talk about our final frontier, it's this program that Neale and Humanity's team have created. It's to bring these teachings into our daily lives, such that we can embody them and come into health and well-being, into a fulfilled state, into an empowered state, and create true prosperity. Of course, that means financial prosperity, which comes from right livelihood, which means that we're doing work that's aligning with our values. But true prosperity is going far beyond just financial prosperity. This is bringing in an expanded view and creativity and freedom and peace, and this whole aspect that we as leaders are helping to create this world that is working for everyone, that's creating prosperity for the whole world. So we're never winning at the expense of another. In oneness, winning is always a win for ourselves and for all people everywhere and for all of life. So let's go ahead and just kind of go down into this and just talk about this in a little more depth. I think, let's see, are we sharing? It looks like we may be sharing screen now. Neale, can you see the shared screen?
Yes, and we are now looking at the list of 24 modules in the program. That's a list of the key points that I picked out from all of the Conversations with God books, from the 10 books. And we picked out 24 items that we really wanted to discuss in depth over a period of several weeks. And so that's what makes the program unique, because we not only discuss those topics, Steve, academically, but we discuss them on a personal level. The sharings are now up on the screen. Let me just give you an example. In this multi-week program, in the first week, we will talk about sharing number 1, which is how to really know God. And in that video, I share how I have come to know God and how I've come to know that God is speaking directly to me and to all of us. The second sharing in that first week is how to hear God in our daily experience. And I will share how I hear God in my daily experience and how I know that God is present and speaking to me and to all of us directly. The third sharing in that first week of the program is how to know who you really are, techniques and tools that have allowed us to discover and then to experience who we really are. And that's the content just from the first week of this program. In week 2, we talk about how to activate God's power as part of our own lives, how to seek to activate that power by holding it close and going within, and by thanking God in advance, how to use the wonderful tool of gratitude in advance to create real abundance and happiness in our lives. And again, as Steve mentioned, not just abundance in terms of financial abundance, which of course is important and vital to all of us, but abundance in all of its forms, an abundance of joy, an abundance of happiness, an abundance of love in our life. We also will discuss in week number 2, sharing number 5, how we can turn anger, doubt, and fear into love. We talked a little bit about that right here on this program. I want to go in depth on that. I don't want to just have a chance to talk to you about it as quickly as I can in a program as short as this, but I want you to have an opportunity to hear me to talk about it in depth, to know what I've learned about love and fear. And finally, sharing number 6 of week 2, how to be clear about the purpose of our life. You know, if I'm asked one question in my life, more than any other single question, I'm asked at every workshop, and retreat, and seminar, Neale, how can I find the purpose of my life? And I want to share that with you. I want to share with you how I found the purpose of my life and see if my experience can benefit yours. So that's what's involved in week 2 of this program. In week 3, we talk about self-realization and how I found a way to self-realize. We also talk about how I found a way to create a friendship with God. That's sharing number 8 in this 24 module series. Imagine now taking 24 of the I want to call them the hottest topics from all the Conversations with God books, how I created a friendship with God, and then how I created, in sharing number 9, a communion with God. I will share my experience of communion with God and how I found a way to do that in life, and how everything can be truly on earth as it is in heaven when the time of separation is over and the time of communion is at hand. All of us are experiencing communion with God all the time. Communion is not something that just happens in a particular church or in a particular way at a particular time. And we talk about that. And I share how I have experienced both my friendship with God and my communion, my sense of communion with God. In the 4th week, we have a wonderful list as well of topics that take up.
Garth, I think Garth is sharing screen. You're going to need to scroll down there for us, Garth. Thank you.
Yeah, and there is in the 4th week, sharing number 10, where we ask the fundamental questions. And are you kind? Are you happy? Are you joyful? Are you being gracious? And most of all, are you being loving? And I talk about how I interacted and worked with the divine and worked with all the people in my life to respond to those fundamental questions. And as well, how to know the great secret of life, which is sharing number 11. The great secret of life, by the way, I can give it to you in one sentence. Happiness is not created as a result of certain conditions. Certain conditions are created as a result of happiness. And boy, do I want to talk to you about that in depth, because that's one of the great misunderstandings in the human experience as I have observed it. Finally, in that 4th week, we would talk about living consciously in a contextual field. You know, I want to tell you something. I think that there's a great secret here that people are not aware of, that if everyone knew it, it would be taught in every elementary school in the world. But it's not. It's the secret is about the contextual field and how we have created a contextual field quite deliberately on this planet, but simply haven't been using it in the way it was intended to be used. So sharing number 12 is about how to live consciously in a contextual field. This program is really remarkable in terms of what it offers us a chance to deeply explore. We can learn how to embrace failure in our life. And in week 5, that's the first topic we look at. How to hold the idea of failure in your life, what people are telling you you're failing at, what you've told yourself that you have failed at in your own life, and how to recontextualize, to use that contextual field again, how to recontextualize the experience of failure so that you never again have to be down on yourself for what you've told yourself are your life's biggest failures. And you can do that, by the way, by following the impulse of your soul, which is sharing number 14 in week number 5. How to connect with the soul. We talked a little bit about that today, but I want to talk in depth about it and how to follow the impulse of the soul because when you follow the impulse of the soul, you can actually choose a state of consciousness in advance, which is sharing number 15. How to choose a state of consciousness in advance. This may just be one of the most important videos I have ever created. I don't want you to miss the opportunity to hear about that. In the 6th week of the program, we talk about a powerful, powerful 2-word message from Conversations with God: there's enough. And we talk about how that could possibly be true when the appearance of things is that there's not enough. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough love, there's not enough of many of the things we think we need to be happy. At least that's the illusion of insufficiency. And I will talk in depth about my experience of that and how I overcame that experience in my own life, how I found out that there is enough. And one of the ways I did that was by living into the unity of all of life, which is sharing number 17 in week number 6. How to live into the unity, how to become one with the oneness, if I could put it that way. And that was an experience that was profound in my life. And I really, really, really went in depth in that, letting people who are watching the video know how I experienced it in my life. Sharing number 18 of that week is a really important one: how to speak my truth all the time. I talk about the power and the peace that I experienced after learning in CWG about the 5 levels of truth-telling. And I talk about each of those 5 levels of truth-telling and the struggle that I had, because it was not an easy thing for me to do, the struggle that I had in stepping into those 5 levels of truth-telling. In week number 7, we look at how to harness the power of metaphysics. Wow. See, what God said to me in Conversations with God, book 4, Awaken the Species, that one of the differences between highly evolved beings and most people who are living in an unawakened state is that highly evolved beings have learned how to harness the power of metaphysics. And most people are not doing that in their life. So I will discuss how I learned to harness the power of metaphysics in my own life. And one of the ways I did it, by the way, was how to shift to positive thoughts. That's one powerful way to harness the power of metaphysics. And so in sharing number 20, I talk about how to shift to positive thoughts in our life, and how I had to do it in my life, because I was not always a positive thinker. But it involves more than just the power of positive thinking. It involves a great deal more than just that. So I share in depth the process that I used to finally get to a place where I shifted to positive thoughts. And then I moved to a very, very powerful topic in week number 7 as we begin to close out the program. Never fear or mourn your own death or the death of another. That's one of the big differences between, here we go again, highly evolved beings and people who are living in an unawakened state. An awakened person never fears or mourns their own death or the death of another. And I want to share with you how I, in my own personal life, moved through that encounter with the biggest process of life itself, which is death. In sharing number 2, in week number 8, I talk about how I love myself and others just as fully as I possibly can, and loving others just as they are, as well as how to love myself just as I am. Again, one of the biggest, I don't mind admitting this, one of the biggest struggles I had in my life. Would it be possible for me to actually love myself exactly as I am? And there's more going on here than meets the eye. I can tell you about that also. That's in sharing number 23. What is really going on the earth, and what is really happening? What is the true function and purpose of life? Something I didn't really realize until I read Conversations with God, which is a book, by the way, that I read. It's not a book that I wrote. I simply read it as it was being given to me. And finally, sharing number 24 in the last week of this program, how we can all join together in awakening the species. So I can tell you now that this is something I have wanted to do for many, many years. Could I just find a way to share my own personal experience of all of this with all of you? And I'm so grateful to Humanities Team for having given me a chance to do that. Steve?
This program, there are these bonuses that are going with the program. You can see there's this $397 bonus that it's a full day, 24 module program is what is our final frontier. But one of the bonuses is this full day audio program of Neale during 7 hours, where he's teaching about these messages from Conversations with God. There's this bonus item that we're including with the program that we're offering, and there's this $397 value on the first bonus. The second one is this is actually something I've done. It talks about bringing presence. So it's bringing presence, which is oneness, into a business context. So the culture, the governance process, everything is being informed by presence. It's a pretty amazing program. There's a $197 value on that. This next third bonus item here below, if you want to scroll up here, Garth, Awaken the New Species. This is a 90-minute program that Barbara Marks Hubbard did with Lynn McTaggart, where she's doing a 52-week program. This is one of the most important programs in that 52 weeks that she did with Lynn McTaggart, where she gets into this whole discussion of what she calls the protective bomb of your whole being to protect you from negative thoughts as we're living in this place of what I'll call oneness. And it includes these 11 powerful and inspiring audio recordings. One is called Being Truly Present, Letting Go of Your Ego, Being Fearless, Unspoken Secret of the Law of Attraction, Creating and Running a Conversations with God-Based Business, How to Stay in Your Heart Space, Financial Prosperity and Physical Abundance, Happier Than God, Creating Your Right Livelihood, True Love and Conversation with God, and Home with God. And if you can just scroll down a little more there, Garth. Then there's also these other two bonuses that are tied into that one, Creating Your Own Reality and How to Have Your Own Conversations with God.
I simply want to say thank you for having the chance to spend the first 35 or 40 minutes with you discussing my experience and my answers to the questions that were the backbone, the spine of this particular sharing today. And thanks for letting us spend the last 15 or 18 minutes to tell you about how we can look at these more deeply and in much greater depth because of the opportunity that Humanities Team has given me to present this program. So we hope that it's been of value to you to be here to learn not only about my personal experience, as I've talked to you about in the first 40 minutes or so, but also about this wonderful program that we talked about in the last 17 or 18 minutes. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to have this time with you.
Okay, everyone. We are going to recap now this amazing transformational education program created by Neale Donald Walsch, the author of Conversations with God, and Humanities Team. And as we recap, I want to share a little bit of history. The Conversations with God books, the first book came out in 1995. It's called Book One. The 10th and final Conversations with God book came out in 2017. It was called Awaken New Species. There was 22 years of wisdom that was spread across these 10 books called Conversations with God that changed people's perceptions about life and about God. And candidly, that changed how we're living on the planet today. Now, in this program, we spent 3 months working together to excavate all of the most important wisdom from those 10 Conversations with God books down into this master's program called Our Final Frontier, a journey into mastery in living. And our incredible mission was to put the most important wisdom, the most impactful wisdom, the most powerful wisdom into 24 video modules, and then create 3 mentoring sessions and all of these other things, which I'll get to in a moment. We spent over $1 about 3 months excavating that wisdom to create these 24 video modules that Neale has just talked a little bit about. Now, I'm going to recap, and I'm going to review the entire opportunity here with this incredible pricing. But before I do that, I want to also share how it is that we can offer all of this with this incredible pricing. Humanities Team is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 here in the United States. Okay, that's based here. We're actually all over the world. When you're a nonprofit, you have no shareholders. So we're not trying to enrich any shareholders through the transformational education programs that we offer. Our mission is very simply to awaken our oneness with the divine, each other, and all of life, and to empower people, candidly, to help people self-realize, which is the invitation and the opportunity in life, to become empowered and to self-realize, to become who we really are. That's our whole mission and purpose. So we're going to put as much wisdom into a new program as we can, then we're going to price it as low as we possibly can to reach the maximum number of people worldwide that can have, so they have exposure to these incredible transformational education programs. And transformation means that we become new, right? Transformational education. I think a lot of programs that are offered don't necessarily make us new. Our programs are really aiming at that, where we live our lives as one with the divine, each other, and all of life, and the earth, this beautiful planet that we live on. Okay, so with that as a little history, I'm going to share a screen here now, and I'm going to recap all of what this opportunity is. And here you go. Here you go. What you will receive. Okay, our final frontier, a journey into mastery and living. What is this? Okay, this is what it is. 24 recorded video sessions with Neale Donald Walsch. These are the 24 modules that we excavated from the 10 Conversations with God books spread over 22 years. The most important wisdom that is that helps us to become empowered and self-realized. 24 PDF transcripts of the program. 24 recorded MP3 audios. Recordings of 3 60-minute mentoring sessions. We recorded Neale with a large group of people that were viewing these modules, asking questions about the modules, asking questions, making comments. Very insightful to sit with these 3 60-minute sessions where people are deeply engrossed in this wisdom and asking powerful questions about how to apply this wisdom to their daily living. Okay, an exclusive membership in our Facebook community called Our Final Frontier, plus this bonus collection, which is incredibly rich. There are actually 5 bonus items. I'm going to go scan them here in just a second. I know we've kind of gone through this, but I want to just hit it one more time so you can see how incredibly rich these 5 bonus sessions are. Okay, so all of that and the price, $297. Okay, we're offering all of this for $297. And candidly, the 24 video modules alone, or the mentoring sessions alone, or the bonus sessions alone, you know, are amazing. We're truly bringing in transformational education. So we're real excited to offer you this opportunity. Neale Donald Walsch is the founder of Humanities Team. He and I actually launched it back in 2003, and we're real excited to be bringing you something this substantial with this kind of wisdom that can create this kind of reach and impact all over the planet. But most importantly, that we can bring into our own home, right? So we can embody the wisdom, and we can become empowered, and we can become self-realized in our life. So now I'm going to just real quickly scan these bonuses again, because I want to. We're excited. The bonuses alone, you know, candidly, are a great $297 opportunity. So this, when everything changes thing. This is a 1 day. It's a 1 day audio intensive with Neale. And then this is a program that I created about the Conscious Business Declaration and global standards for flourishing in business. Okay, so here we're talking about taking the Conversations with God wisdom, which is about presence, right? Where we're embodying divine presence, and we're bringing that into a business setting, so that the culture of the business is all about is informed both in its collaboration and in decision making by presence. So the culture is where people are coming together in a container of presence of the sacred, and discussing, collaborating, and making decisions. So a really important wisdom in today's world. Okay, bonus 3, Awaken New Species with Barbara Marks Hubbard and Lynn McTaggart. Wow, we did a 52-week program, and this was one of the most powerful programs. It's 90 minutes in the 52 weeks. So I won't read this whole thing here, but you want to come back and look at this page and read the bonuses carefully. Read the whole program carefully, as Neale and I have been emphasizing. We can't possibly do this justice to describe for you the wisdom and invitation and opportunity in our final frontier, a journey into mastery and living through this little program. We are sending you a link so that you can come back and you can review this carefully, and we invite you to do that. Come back and review this carefully, really sit with it and feel into it as you're feeling into your own life and your own destiny, and decide, is this something that can help slingshot you, propel you, accelerate you on your journey into conscious living? We believe this has the power and possibility to do that for anybody that feels into it and resonates with what the program is about. Okay, so then bonus number 4, this is called Listen to Neale Speak the Messages. And look at what is in here. So this is, there are 11 recordings here, 11 audio recordings, but then there are 2 extra audio recordings. And I won't, being truly present, letting go of your ego, being fearless. I won't read all of these, but I invite you to come back and read these carefully. It's amazing. And then wrapping up with this whole Conversations with God in a Nutshell bonus, where we Neale distilled all of the wisdom into a publication, which we'll share with you, the publication. And then the interviews, where Neale and I are actually going through the publication and talking about this wisdom. Why was this wisdom identified as the most important wisdom in the Conversations with God books? So that's, of course, this is an 8-week program. Here's one of the recaps, the summaries of the 8-week program. Another summary of the 8-week program right here as you journey to mastery and living, what you'll discover. I'm not going to read all of these, but astounding, really. Okay, astounding what we've created here, and we've created it. I'll come back. I want to just leave it with the whole recap here in front of us. Of course, there's the standard. We have a 2-week money-back guarantee on our program. So it's an 8-week program, and you can go 2 weeks into the program, and there's a full money-back guarantee if for some reason it's not what you thought it would be. Okay, but this is the recap of the program, which we couldn't be more excited about. And we're just totally stoked to be unveiling this to you today, because our community is all about conscious living. For all of us, it's about journeying into self-realization, journeying into our own oneness with the divine, each other, and all of life, which is to say the earth, our oneness with the earth, our oneness with other people, our oneness with animal life, our oneness with plant life. Right? Self-realization, our oneness with the one. There's nothing but the one. That's what Conversations with God shares. We're all emanations of the one, right? So, but that can be a very abstract concept. And when we talk about how to bring that wisdom down, how to embody it, how to express it in our own life and with our partner that we're dating or that we're married to, and with our kids in our home, in our business setting, in our community, in schools, in politics, like Marianne Williamson is doing, on and on. This is what gets into that level of application, the practical application of really living it, embodying it, expressing it, becoming empowered, becoming self-realized. Okay, and with that, I'm just going to say namaste, and Neale and I hope to see you in this program. Feel into it, see if you resonate with it, see if you get that inner yes. Would love to have you join us in the program if it feels right for you. Okay, thanks again for spending this time with us.